Hello and a very good day to everyone. So today I would like to showcase to you a Nuix Workstation demo. So basically what you're looking at right now is actually Nuix Workstation user interface, right? And yeah, so just to share a bit about Nuix Workstation. In Nuix Workstation, we have this Nuix engine where it can process all the structured and unstructured data. And in Nuix Workstation, Nuix actually support thousands of data types, so you can pretty much import a lot of data into Nuix, right? So as I mentioned earlier, this is actually a Nuix Workstation user interface, and as you can see at the left hand side here, this is at the top left. This is something what we call as document navigator. All right, so basically document navigator is my digital evidence, right? So all my evidence is here, and it is also a visual representation of my evidence file directory. So basically, when you import a file or a folder, or perhaps or maybe a network folder into Nuix, so this is actually your file directory, right? So if I expand on this evidence, what we have in this file, digital evidence, we have some, uh, well, what I can say is in this, so for this demo, we have actually imported all the datasets beforehand because it might take longer to show that. Uh, but just to tell you, for this demo, we have actually two. The first one is actually a general datasets, uh, which is actually the objective of this general dataset is to show the basic functionalities of Food Nuix, right? And another dataset is actually consists of certain scenarios. For instance, like someone from the team leaking out the information to the external parties, and also some scenarios related to some manipulative behavior of the employee. Yeah, so that's basically about this dataset that I have imported in Nuix. All right, and then another great thing about Nuix is that after you import and after Nuix process the datasets or all the data, the engine actually extract the data out and indexes all the text and pull the data into our Lucy database. All right, so as a result, we can do a fast searching, right? And another thing that Nuix does is that it will categorize all the data based on its data type. So if you expand, for instance, on this filtered items section, uh, we have all the category here: email, contacts, documents, spreadsheet, and let's say that if I wanted to filter email, then I just click email here. Then at the result section here, it will only displays all the emails that I have gathered or I have imported into Nuix, which is really great. Yeah, which is really great. And another thing that you might wanted to see, I mean, one of the first thing that you might wanted to do after importing the files is to check whether is there any data that you might miss, right? So for instance, what you can do is you can go to the irregular items, and there are certain types of files will be categorized as non-searchable PDF, back extension unrecognized. So for instance, if I click non-searchable PDF, this is not actually, I mean, we might wanted to process all the files, including this file. So, but since it is not readable, so that's why you can see the. I mean, if I click at this O'Hare PDF, Right, so if you can see on the preview section here, the text is missing. So text is actually showing you all the text extracted. So in order for you to have this text uh, preview here, you might need to perform the OCR, right? So what you can do is you can tick on this O'Hare PDF, right click, and you can perform OCR, right? Then you can just choose default. You can configure the OCR profile. Then this is basically where you can configure all the the, the configuration, right? So yep. Then you can configure the language so that it can extract the text better. So in this case, I'm going to go for English, right? So then we can just click OK. Then the moment you click OK, OCR will be started, and you can actually run the process in background, right? Right, so while waiting for that, I'm just going through this preview section. Right, we have this metadata tab here. So basically it will show all the metadata of this O'Hare PDF or the document that you have clicked at the moment, right? Then we have family. So family is, for instance, if this is an attachment, uh, so it will show the whole structure of the original, for instance, original email, right? So you can see something like a parent email, parent file, which consists of this attachment. All right, so this is basically the function of family tab. Next, we have printed image. Right, so printed image is actually like a preview thing. You can preview the image without having to launch your native application, right? So this is really actually really interesting. You can just preview all the contents by using the printed image, right? Then you can have a native tab. So this is actually uh, where you can use the third-party native application to open the files, to launch the file. So for instance, this is a PDF file. So if you launch this one, it might launch Adobe Acrobat PDF reader, right? Then we have a binary tab, which consists of binary information of these particular files. Then you have a word list, right? So basically, the since the OCR haven't completed yet, so basically what this word list do is actually summarize the number of words and number of words found in the files. It counts the number of occurrence. So well, this is actually very useful, for instance, for fraud use case. And for instance, if you are investigating one particular document, then that particular document mention one company many times, then you might wanted to start investigating that particular company. All right, so the OCR process has been completed, so that's why it pop out something just now, right? So if you go here, right, actually showing you the results, but anyway, I'm just click OK, right? Then if I clear this one again, and if I search for O'Hare, right? So if I go to the text section, you can see that all the text has been extracted. So text is actually different from printed image. Printed image is actually you show the image, but text is just showing the text extraction. So this is actually indicating that the OCR have been successfully uh, uh, performed on this particular file. So like I mentioned earlier, if I search for international airport, right? Right, inter oh, international airport. So you can see that uh, it will highlight the international airport. So this is indicates that OCR has been performed on this particular file. And you can also go to the word list as I mentioned earlier. So it will find counts all the words, count the words occurrence in this particular file, right? Then we have a different tab. Well, different tab is actually is to compare two documents, right? And I will show you how to use this later. A better use case, but the idea of this, I mean, the difference tab is really useful. For instance, if you wanted to investigate something related to document forging investigation. Yep. So you might wanted to see two similar documents, but you might wanted to see which particular section have been forged. Yeah, so this is one of the way you can choose. You can use difference tab. All right, then you go to the history. So history is basically all the activity list of activity performed that have been performed towards this particular file in Nuix. So it is like an audit trail, right? So yep. So just now I have performed OCR of this for this file, so that's why it is being recorded here. Yeah, so basically that is history, right? So let us go back to the first screen. We show all the result, right? So one of the way you can start your investigation is, there's a lot of data here, so it might be a bit tricky to start. To think where to start your investigation. So one of the way you can start your investigation is by using this one interesting feature in Nuix, which is name entities, right? So if I go here, if I click name entities, right? So name entities is like an object resembling a specific data pattern. So it's the information is extracted from our entire data set, right? So for instance, if I choose company, so it will by referring to specific data pattern, so it will extract all the text that looks like a company. So for instance, a company usually ends with corporations or Pty Ltd, something like that, right? So it will list out all the information that Nuix things might be related. Might be a company. So you can change to a credit card, right? You can change to email. Then you can change. If you wanted to see, like for instance, this particular email have been mentioned. The number of currency is quite high for this entire data set. So if you wanted to see uh, what is it all about, you can just double click it, right? Then you can see all the email here, right, which might be related to this Philip email. Then you can go to person, you can go to money, and this is also really interesting. So for instance, if you're investigating something related to money, so if you have that specific amount of money that you wanted to that you're trying to investigate, so you might want to search here. So if that particular amount is displayed here, then you might wanted to start your investigation there, right? So this is also a very interesting tool, yeah. Then oops, sorry. Then you have a phone number, country, IP address, and URL. So stuff like that, it can be used in name entities, right? So let us go back to the first screen again. Right, now I wanted to show you the search function in Nuix. So it is actually really powerful. So for instance, if I search from George, it will list all the documents that is actually from George. Most likely it will be like an email, right? So then if you can see here, we have 11 email, right? And then there's what if you click on this first email, you can actually read the email here, right? But then you can see there's a thread here, related item thread 16. So what it tells you is that this particular email has 16 email thread. So if you click on this thread, it will list all the email thread for you, which is really powerful. Yeah, which is really powerful. And I mean, in this case, in this demo, we have 16 items, but in the actual investigation, you might be working on with thousands of data, right? Thousands of data, millions of data. So one of the way you wanted to speed up your investigation is perhaps you might wanted to use something like event map, right? So if I click on event map, it shows some sort like a timeline, and it also tells you that uh, there's a communication between George and Jason for a certain period of time, right? So if you click one of the dots, you can read the email, right? So this is actually from George to Jason, then from Jason to George. You can see all the uh, email threads, but in a visual representation, which is really really interesting. But as you if you notice here, there's also some personal email involved, right? So if you can see at the log here, someone have been sending an email to the personal email. So if I click on this one, so you can see that this is actually Jason Marsh sending something to a George personal email, right? So this is actually really interesting because in the real life investigation, you might be, you might want to check what are some of the information that have been sent to the personal email. Is there anything confidential? I mean, this might look suspicious, and this is where you can also narrow down your investigation, right? Then you can also use, apart from event map, you can also use network, and network is also a really powerful tool because, like I said, it also helps you to speed up your investigations, and we can actually see the whole picture of this relationship, right? So you can pretty much see that who's been communicating. For instance, if George is your main suspect, you can see who's been communicating with your main suspect, and that will maybe help you to expand your investigation to another steps, right? Right, next up is, let us go back to the first screen again. Then we might wanted to see another thing which is really interesting, which is files, right? So basically, files is something like a log sheet of what data have been processed. So you can see here we have processed 7,000, around 7,000 log file entry, 3,000 Skype chat, and 200 of 300 of browser cookies, 32 Excel spreadsheet, 32 Microsoft 2007 Words documents, and all that kind of stuff, which is really interesting because you can get the whole picture. What is it being processed in Nuix, right? So that is files. Then you also have these word features. So word feature is also another uh, interesting tools where you can find some keyword uh, in this feature. So what does this word feature do is actually uh, similar to the word list just now in the metadata, but instead of counting the words in specific file, but this one, it it count all the number of occurrence throughout your entire data sets. So you might wanted to find certain transaction code, or maybe there's some particular keyword that you might wanted to see, that you might wanted to look up. Then this is something that you can use, words feature, right? And then you can also have a topic feature. Right. So let's say that you are dealing with a lot of documents, and there's no time for you to go one by one. So what? And this is actually for when you're using topic summarization. This is actually a quick summary of what the document is all about. So that is a really powerful tool. I mean, for instance, it gives you some quick summary. So for instance, like you see here, oh, what are companies send concessions and price profits, concession price and profits. Then if you double click it, then it will show all the files related to it. So this is also one of the powerful tool to use in Nuix. Yeah. All right. Then we move on to another interesting tool, which is cluster run. Right. So basically, yep, you might be dealing with a lot of data, but this cluster run is really powerful. So what it does is cluster run provide a means for a data by grouping and displaying similar documents that might be related to it. So let me show you how is it being done. Right. So let's say if I filter only email, right? It's still a lot. Then if I just select all and I right click and I choose cluster run, then I use email thread. Let's say I rename it as email cluster. Right. So if you go down here, there's a cluster run here. Right. So if you click one of the email cluster, you can see that all the similar email have been grouped into one cluster, which is really useful for your investigation, right? So this might be, I mean, this might help your investigation to be a bit more organized, right? Rather than storing all the information in one place, right? So this is the second cluster, right? This is the third cluster. So this is really powerful tool, right? You can you can also do this with Word document, not just email. So for instance, if I go for documents, if I right click and cluster run and generate, right? So after is it being done, let us go back to the cluster run folder, right? There you go. So if I click one of the cluster, right? I'm sorry, let me just clear everything up. If I click one of the cluster, so you can see that all the similar documents have been grouped. And this is also actually very useful if you wanted to investigate something related to document forging. So for instance, if I click this one and also this one, and if I find some difference, right? So how similar is the document? So you can see here there's there's some error which has been manipulated, which has been updated. So yep, like I mentioned, this is really useful if you wanted to see which particular section have been forged. All right, and then right. So let me just go back to the first screen. And then we have this thing, what we call as the metadata profile. So for instance, if I only filter email, then you can see that there's some column here, name, right? A description, but it might not be very useful for email. So you might want to know who are the sender, who are the recipients, right? So what you can do, you can actually change the metadata, the column profile. So for instance, if I choose email, then it will show me the column that I wanted, right? Which is really useful for email. And this column profile is, basically you can customize it right? For instance, if I want to add something, right, then I can just add the metadata properties from here. Then you can just use this column profile anytime you want. Yep. So let me just switch back to context. All right. So this is the first part of our presentation. All right. So the next part would be, as I mentioned earlier, we have some sample data which is related to some scenario, right? So so let me show you how we can investigate those. I mean, how we can use Nuix to deal with such scenario. All right. So let us go back to the first screen. All right. So so for the first one, we assuming that we are investigating something related to someone from your team leaking out information to the external party, right? So you might want it to, first of all, you might, I mean, you understand that there might be some activity related to the emails, right? So the first thing first, you might want it to filter it by email. Yep, that's the first thing you can do. But still, this is still a lot of data here. You might want it to narrow it down. Then you can use something like entities, right? So if I just use entities, then let's say that if I wanted to search, this is a company, I wanted to search for email, right? So assuming that I wanted to search an email that is our main suspect, which is Nushahira, there you go. We have this email included in the entities, email entities. So if we double click it, you can see all the emails related to Nur Shahira. And also, if you can see at the bottom here, uh, there's a warning email to No Shahira. So if you can see this email, right? So if you go click the one above it, dear Shah, the management have found out that you might have contributed to information leak activity on our latest project tender. Bingo, which is actually something that we wanted to look, but still, we still haven't got the overall picture of the storyline, right? So you can use the one that I have shown earlier, which is the event map, right? So if I click on the event map, then you can see the whole timeline. All right, so this is actually the email that Takif have sent to Shah, which is the warning email. So by right, the issue should happening before this time, right? Before this time. So so for instance, if I click on this, by looking at this, you know that right, there's some communication between Nushahira and Peter Buck. And if you click one of the dots here, and suddenly that you see that this is actually Nushahira sending emails to Peter Buck. And she mentioned, I mean, she's actually uh, sending some documents, right? So what are the documents? Then this is where you can use the family tab. Then you can see, oh, she's actually sending two proposals to Peter Buck. And this is actually the proposal, I mean, the issue that we're talking about. These two proposals have been leaked out. Then you might see that, all right, so this particular timeline might be relevant to the investigation. So why not we just go to the first dot here, right? So if we go back to email, right, so you can see here Peter Buck sending to everyone. So this is actually CC, right? We are currently looking for vendor, blah 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 blah. And the second dot here, right, dear Mr. Peter, thank you for the document. We will proceed with the tender document. All right. So nothing really suspicious. Then Peter Buck sending email to Nushahira. Shah, could you do me a favor? I need you to share all the information from the other two vendors. Keep this conversation between us as this is confidential. Well, this is getting really suspicious, right? So if you click on this second dot, well, this is actually a same email, so might be some duplication here. So if we click on this dot here, This is actually Nur Shahira replying to Peter Buck, and she's actually asking what's the reason for the request. Then yep, so you can go to the next timeline. I can share the reason for the request to you, which is really, I mean, yeah, again, really suspicious. But we need the document as there is something urgent. Kindly share the document ASAP. Then you can see that, well, Peter is actually threatening Shah if she's not giving the document, so he can't guarantee the future, uh, right? So yeah, so by looking at this timeline, at the initial stage, we just understand that Shah has been accused. But when we use 2 weeks to actually drill down the investigation, we understand that there's someone behind it. And actually, as you can see here, this person named Peter is actually forcing her to give the document and threaten her. Maybe she will fire her if she can do this thing, right? So this is one of the way you can use Nuix to investigate such thing. Yep. Right, that's the first use case. All right, let me show you another scenario which is related to some manipulative uh, boss, which this is the information that we have. There is some manipulative boss, and the victim name is Jenna, and the boss actually threatening her to do. I mean, the boss is asking her to do one particular job that is out of her scope, and the boss did threaten her up until he forced her to cancel her annual leave, which is really, I mean, it's not a good thing, and it is a very manipulative person, right? So how to start our investigation? So like I mentioned earlier, since it's email communication, we can start with email, right? But still there's a lot of documents here, and apart from entities, you can also drill down your search by using the search function. So let's say if I just search Jenna, yep, there you go. So you will have all the email that includes the words Jenna. All right. It's not just include the words Jenna. It might be to Jenna, from Jenna, depending on the metadata as well, right? So for this one, it's still really, I mean, we can't really understand the situation from the screen. We have to really drill down the investigation, right? So, so what you can do, uh, perhaps we can use a word list, right? So this is basically all the words that have been counted in this email thread, right? So, yep, since the boss is asking her to cancel her annual leave, so you might want it to say something as some keywords like cancel. There you go. We have one cancel word counted, which might be this is very specific keywords. So if I double click it, there you go. You have one email, which is actually a very specific email. Uh, this is actually Takif, the boss, saying to Jenna, by the way, please cancel your annual leave. Everyone is on a tight schedule here. Please consider that as well. Right, so if you can see on the top here, have application is busy attending the management meeting. I thought you want to take more challenge, or did I hear you wrong? Well, like the report said, this is some kind of a manipulative behavior. But you might wanted to see the whole conversation bit of this email. Since you're just looking at one email here, this is where you can use the thread features. Whereas there's actually 5 emails. So if you click on the thread, you can see all the 5 emails. This is actually the email thread for this particular conversations. Then once you have all the thread, what you can do is just like the one that we have done earlier. You can use event map. Then you can see that there's a series of conversation between Takif and Jenna, right? Then you can see that this is actually the email that we are looking at just now, which is actually the very last conversation of this email conversation. So meaning to say this particular event map is related to this particular conversation. So we might wanted to see uh, we might want to start our investigation for the first dot, right? So from this email we see that we can understand that Takef is asking Jenna to help Asman on the kickoff deck slide preparation, and also there's a new two newcomers, so he wanted Jenna to welcome them since Haliza is busy preparing for his meeting. So right, then you can read the other dots. Right, Jenna said, all right, noted, we'll do the necessary. The third dot, and suddenly Jenna is being asked to work with these two newcomers on the procurement system development, which is something that is not related to Jenna area of expertise. Right, then Jenna uh, reply back, the slide is almost completed. Asman will be sharing it with you by today or tomorrow. I'm not sure about the system thing, as this is not my area. I thought the head application should be the correct person to help them. Plus, I will be on leave for the next week. Then you can see the moment you see these pieces, then you can actually see the whole picture of the storyline. Yep. Then you can see that how manipulative is Takif here. Then yep, this is how you can or actually utilize Nuix to to perform some of the investigation. For instance, like this demo, we have these two scenarios, right? This is just a simple scenarios, but at least we know that this is how we work with Nuix for the investigation. All right. Uh, I think that's all for today, and thank you very much for watching the demo.